Next, I'd like to bring to the podium a gentleman by the name of Chris Crane, who is president of our ICE Council.
Thank you, Brian. I'd like to start out by saying that we were not originally scheduled to be here today. AFGE President John Gage was good enough to let us sneak in at the last minute. I'd like to say thank you for that and apologize for not being better prepared. But I'd like to first call attention to something that we saw in the news here this month, and that was the issues brought up by the Federal Air Marshals. They've been reporting cronyism, lack of arrests, discrimination, padding arrest numbers, internal investigations conducted by the agency against their own employees as a form of retaliation. And I'd like to point out that within ICE, we're having the exact same problem. In fact, the Federal Air Marshals were a part of ICE at one time. Their managers were our managers. We share the same management culture as the Federal Air Marshals. I think that the American public would be ashamed if they knew how these supervisors and managers were behaving. They would be ashamed if they found out how they're conducting business. They would be ashamed and very troubled to find out how their taxpayer dollars are being spent, that their taxpayer dollars are being spent to fund supervisors that act this way, to fund internal investigations against employees that are strictly meant for retaliation, that they fund an employee labor relations department that is strictly there to cover up supervisor misconduct and attack whistleblowers and union representatives, the majority of the time of which these two groups are one and the same. Our union representatives are the ones out there that are blowing the whistle, trying to make sure that business is conducted properly, and their careers are being ruined for it. Now, in March of 2009, I sent a letter to Secretary Janet Napolitano, and I outlined these problems to her, and I specifically pointed out individuals and groups within the agency that needed investigation. I told her very specifically that ICE agents and employees currently have no avenue to conduct whistleblower disclosures without retaliation. No investigation has ever been conducted. I handed the same letter to Assistant Secretary of ICE John Morton. Again, no investigation has ever been conducted. The only thing that I'm aware of that has ever resulted from that is that one of the supervisors, who I specifically named in those whistleblower disclosures, actually came up to me and let me know that he had been given a copy of the whistleblower disclosures that I had made against the agency. And I don't think anyone sitting in this room thinks that anyone at DHS or ICE, the only two people that I gave that letter to were the Secretary herself and the Assistant Secretary. I don't think anyone in this room believes that there was any good intent in turning that letter over to the supervisors that I named in those whistleblower disclosures. But that just gives you a general idea of what ICE employees are dealing with every day. We did meet with Assistant Secretary Morton when he was first getting ready to come on board. He promised us that things were going to change, that we were going to have full access to him as a union, that we were going to be able to discuss things with him, have emails with him, phone conversations with him. About 2 weeks after he took office, was officially appointed, he immediately broke that commitment with us, has completely cut us off. We are now told to go to the Employee Labor Relations Department, which we had already identified to him was littered with problems. During our congressional testimony in December, we identified a lot of issues, and we actually have a copy of that here. I hope some people pick that up and take a look at it. There's some really good information in that. One of the issues that we discussed was the detention reforms within ICE. And we pointed out that 100 outside stakeholders were brought in to give input on how they were going to correct things within ICE. The unions were completely excluded from that. Our employees were excluded from that. Supervisors in the field were excluded from that. And what we now have presented to us from the agency is a system that, again, is just littered with problems. We are going to have 90% convicted criminals or higher in custody. Those facilities, unlike any other facility in the country, will allow prisoners to have total and free run of the facility. There will be no restrictions. We will not be able to conduct strip searches. They will have full contact visits. In other words, we are going to have weapons coming into our facilities, drugs, other contraband, putting other detainees and officers at risk. They're basically putting politics before public safety and employee safety. Our officers, you may not know this, but we have no protective equipment available to us inside the facilities. We will be dramatically outmanned by a almost completely criminal population, and we won't have anything to protect ourselves with. So, and at the same time, I think it's important to note that these reforms that were supposed to be made to assist or protect our detainees will actually put many of those detainees at higher risk, as we won't be able to separate the good from the bad, and the gang members from the non-gang members, and even people potentially that have never been arrested on any police charge ever will be in with very dangerous convicted criminals. In fact, we testified in Congress that under the current system there will only be approximately 5 charges that will prevent any criminal from being housed in one of these facilities, all of which basically are weapons-related offenses of violence. And we pointed out in particular that the last detainee that assaulted me had previously been arrested and convicted of assaulting a police officer. He then assaulted me, was convicted and given 13 months for assaulting a federal police officer. That guy will be allowed to be in this facility the next time we come in contact with him, because he didn't use a weapon in the commission of any of those crimes. So we're very concerned about the detention reforms, among other things. Pay parity is something that we're talking about as well, as some of the other groups up here today. DHS Secretary Janet Napolitano upgraded approximately 50,000 CBP employees, but never even gave a look to approximately 7,200 ICE DRO employees, detention and removal operations employees, who have been experiencing pay parity issues for years. We're trying to get the word out. We're already experiencing high attrition rates, and we're trying to get the word out that basically if someone doesn't step in, it's going to be the last one out of ICE, shut off the lights, because our employees have no career promotion ladders. We can't compete on the recruiting level or maintaining these employees, and they present a very serious risk to public safety.